Welcome back to Fixing Furniture. Today I'm working on this rocking chair. Now in my last video I gave viewers the option of should I work on a rocking chair next or a Windsor chair, and the overwhelming response was this rocking chair. It's quite unique. It doesn't have curved rockers on the bottom, it's got a spring action here that allows the chair to rock. Now the key problem on this is the back here has broken off. I've got a tenon on this side, and on this side I've got the tenon missing, so I need to return a piece of wood here to get it to connect in there. Now when I work on a piece like this, I use the analogy of an old house. You never know what you're going to find until you start doing the work. I think there's probably a few surprises in this rocking chair. I've got a pile of parts that are here. These I believe go on this side here, some beautiful hand carved parts. So these all need to go together as well. There's some loose veneer on the seat. When I tap on the veneer, it's solid in some spots and it's loose in others. So there's a lot of work to do here. Stick with me, I'll show you how it's done.
As a furniture repair business, we're opening the doors to our workshop to show you the tools and techniques to repair furniture.
The front rail here, you can see this has been broken off.
We give you tips to make your repair projects easier. Let's get into the workshop and start fixing furniture.
Sponsored by Kennedy Hardware, offering restoration hardware for antique furniture. One of the things I enjoy about furniture repair and restoration is a little bit of the mystery. How did a chair like this become so broken? Well, I think there are some fundamental physics here that cause this. And if you look at that phrase that people say they don't make things like they used to, well, there's some survivor bias in that. The furniture that we see that's old is the strongest of the furniture that was built back then. I've only been able to find 2 of these chairs online. It's called a platform rocker. And I believe that there aren't many around because, frankly, they broke. A traditional rocking chair rocks on a rocker, a piece of wood that's curved. So as there's pressure put on the back, the whole chair moves back and forth. But on this particular rocker, there's a spring action here. So when there's weight put on the back, there's a constant pressure on that back. So this one clearly broke off. There's been a number of repairs to this already. It's been really damaged, so I'm not sure how much I can reverse of those repairs. So we'll take a look at all the different parts here. The base is loose, I have to take it apart. The key part that I need to work on is the joinery here, so that back is going to be as solid as possible. Up here, it's just been brutalized in terms of how it's been put together. So a lot of work to undo. So let's start by looking at the base, taking the base apart, and then maybe we can get a little more history here in terms of what this chair is all about. On old hardware, there typically is some stamping that identifies the hardware, and I can see a little bit here. So I'll unscrew this, pull that plate off, and we can take a closer look. Okay, so on here it says patent January. That's tough. Is that a 97? Maybe if I pull another one of these off, I can get a better look at it. Okay, so here's another one. It's a little more pronounced. Let's see if I clean away some of the dust around it. Might make it easier to read. Okay, patented January 5th, 97. Okay, so that's a hint. I'll see what I can find online about this, but in the meantime, I'll continue to take this apart. So as I showed you earlier, these dowels are moving in and out, but in order to take this apart, I need to take this joint off. And these are sliding dovetails. So it's a dovetail shape, and this piece of wood is slid in there. So I'm not sure if I can take this apart because this is typically a very strong joint. It looks like there might be some glue residue here from a repair. So I'll see if that'll tap out. If not, I'm not sure there's much I can do on this end. These sliding dovetails aren't coming apart, and you see this lighter line right here. There's actually a bit of texture to it. This is glue residue. So someone would have glued this together with PVA glue, a bit dripped here, and they didn't clean it up before it dried. And then when they applied the stain, it didn't stain there as well. So unfortunately, these pieces aren't coming apart. If these were put together with high glue, I could reverse the glue, but in this case, it's permanent. So the best I can do here is spread these apart, see if I can get some hide glue in here and tighten those up as best I can. So take a clamp, convert it over to a spreader clamp, and let's see if I can gently open this up enough to get some glue in there. Okay, that's actually come up much more than I thought it would. So I'll squeeze some hide glue on here, and then what I'll do is spread it around all of the tenon. So what I'm doing here by doing this is just maximizing the amount of glue I can get on that joint. Okay, I need a little bit more on the underside here. And then I can release the clamp and get this put back together again. So I can now clamp this up, and the base is all back together again. So I'll just clean off the glue residue here before I set this aside. And this is the fundamentals of furniture repair and restoration. Being able to take something apart and glue it together properly with the right adhesive to be able to repair furniture. If this is something you're interested in learning, I'm building a hands-on course so you can learn not just the knowledge, but get some experience on how to do furniture restoration and repair. Check it out at fixingfurniture.com. The course is coming up soon. So I'll set this part aside and then we'll start working on the seat. So I've got the seat laid out here with the back, and what I want to do is look at the joinery. So we'll start here on this post. So the tenon's in good shape, but it's actually got a bit of a beard that's growing here. So for some reason, this has carpet on the bottom. I don't understand that. Now, if we look at the mortise, it's really mangled. So this is not going to hold well. There's a bunch of glue in there, and it's not matching the same size as this, so it's loose. So that mortise has to be repaired. If we look at the center backsplat here, it's really a beautiful piece. But the groove here that the backsplat goes into, someone has done some repair work and they've added in these little pieces of wood to, I think, sort of prop it up. But this actually needs to seat inside that slot. So there's some repair work to do on this mortise. And then over here, this is where we've got the broken post. So someone has put a dowel in here to try and repair this, but that's not a good repair technique because you end up losing material and you end up with breakage like this. So this whole piece needs to be turned on the lathe. Fortunately here, the mortise is in good shape, so we'll be able to salvage that. So we've got one tenon here to repair and two mortises here to repair. The first thing I'm going to do is take off the posts and get these pieces taken apart. Now, when I got this piece from the customer, they didn't provide a lot of history about it, but I have noticed that there are some tags on it. So on the back here, this has a number 203, this one has 202, and it looks like it's from a van line. Perhaps this was an auction. It says lot number B. So it looks like this was probably in several pieces when it was auctioned off. I'm just curious, it looks like there's another tag underneath here. Let's see. Oh yeah, lot number. So maybe this was on a couple of auction blocks. Took a while to sell. So this is the post here that I need to take off. Got some slotted screws. There's one. Now I am seeing some glue residue in here, so I'm not sure how well these are going to come off. So these are round-headed screws, and over here I've got a flat-headed screw and I've got a screw that's missing. So I need to get new screws for this chair. Sourcing slotted screws for antique restoration projects can be very difficult, and that's why I'm proud to be partnering with Kennedy Hardware. They've got slotted screws, so I just need to take my measurement and I can put my order in. Now I'm going to see if I can take these off, but considering there's some PVA glue on either side of these, it might be difficult. Here's a close-up to show you what I mean. There's a light line right here. That's some PVA glue. There's some on the other one as well. Hopefully this person just put a dab here and the rest will come off, but I have to be careful because I don't want the veneer coming off this back. So I'm going to take a sharp knife and I'm going to score the joint between these two pieces here, because I'm going to get a little help with some vinegar. Now, vinegar dissolves hide glue. It softens PVA glue a little bit, so I don't know how much it's going to help here, but I need all the help I can get to make sure I don't damage that veneer. So if I flex this, you can see I've got a little bit of play happening here. That vinegar's, I think, doing a bit of work. So I'll just get the knife back out and see if I can score that a little bit more. Oh yeah, you can see there that white is the rubberiness of the PVA glue. So it's starting to give way a little bit. So I'll see if I can get a wedge in here and pry that out. There we go. Okay, so lucky for me there wasn't a whole lot of glue there. It looked like maybe just on the edge. See what that white line is? Huh, that's strange. So this is the part I need to remake on the lathe, and if I turn this around, I can take a look at what the tenon should look like before this one had broken off. So there's an odd part here. The shoulder of this tenon isn't even. So here, this would be like a normal turning, but it's shaped back here, and that's to go into the curve of the seat. You can see here, we've got that curve as well. So I'll have to cut the shoulder here on the lathe and then trim it by hand. Now the other part of the challenge of this turning is we've got a hole here. This is for the armrest, so that needs to be in a precise location. And then also we've got this part here that needs to be cut out. So there's a few opportunities here for errors. I need to make sure I go through all of these steps in the right order to make sure all these things are located in the right spot. So just measure the length here for the turning stock. So 25¼ is the finished length. And then the diameter, got 1 5/8 inches. So I'll need to move up to 2-inch stock to do the turning. I sort my wood supply by size. This is generally less than 2 feet. This is very small pieces here. I'm looking for red oak, and it looks like I've got some here. That's 2-inch stock, so that'll work. In some cases, dust collection systems work. In this case, you can see here, this really isn't catching much dust at all. It's really important to control dust in a workshop because wood dust is a carcinogen and can cause permanent lung damage. Here you can see on my miter saw, I've developed a dust collection system that really works well. So we've got the blank all roughed out here, and you can see there are some larger chips left over, but the majority of the dust and debris gets sucked up through the dust collector. I'm wearing a dark shirt and dark pants, and I've got nothing on me at all. Typically people wear a turning smock to keep the dust off of them. So I'm hoping that this prototype here is something that's going to work into a product on shelves of every woodworking store. If you want to learn more about the journey of that, go to the Clean Lathe YouTube channel, subscribe, and you get notified when we put videos up. So the next step is to mark out all the areas on the turning here, and I can turn the details. There you have it. It needs some sanding. Ideally I'd be using a skew on something like this, but that's a chisel I haven't really learned how to use well yet. I've had some tear out when I do that. But here I'll hold up the existing piece and you can take a look. I can now take this off the lathe. This has to be cut on an angle once I fit it in the seat, and this needs to be trimmed off. So I'll just cut them off square. So I'll lift this out and take it to the workbench. So here on the end, as I said, there's a sloping cut. It's also rounded, so that has to be fixed once we get to that part. But here, this is where the tenon had broken off. So I need to shape this tenon to fit in the seat. So I'll pull at the seat and we'll start working there. So this is the side here I'm working on this mortise. And I just want to show you before I clean it out. There's little pieces of wood stuck at the bottom. There's a few here at the back. But on this side, we've got a nice, clean, round mortise. So I'm happy with the shape of that. And this is just, again, some of that funky mess that someone put in there. It's going to take a while to clean that out. So right here, what we'll do is focus on this. You can see the tenon is slightly too large for the hole. That's perfect. This way I can work it down and get a nice tight fit. Got a nice clean mortise here, but you can see around the edge here we've got some damage. So I'm hoping that the back post is going to hide that. It's time to start shaping it. So as I work the post in, I want to sort of wiggle it around. It is a little bit loose there, and figure out the direction that it wants to go so I can seat it. But you can see here, this curve here, that's as far as it wants to go. I need to work out some of it here. But there's an important part first. I need to figure out where the arm is going to attach on this and drill a hole to make sure it's all lined up. So there are two posts here. This one either goes this way or this one goes this way. I think it's more likely this way. The way I tell is the arm gets joined right in the middle of this band, right there. And underneath here, that looks like where the dowel goes. So it'll work like this. So this is where I need to get that hole drilled first before I start shaping the back of this and cutting that out. So there's another piece here that goes in, and it's, oh, that's probably backwards. It's notched. So let's see if I can get that into the slot. Might be easier this way. That's a pretty tight fit. Maybe I've got this wrong. Maybe it's this one. They're both pretty tight. Oh, look at that. Someone's glued little pieces of wood in here to try and take up that space. This is not the way you shore up a joint. So I'll have to take that out. It's probably going to be a little bit loose. I'll have to make that joint a better fit. Okay, so now I can get this dowel in here, position this piece. That's not quite seated there. There we go. So now that this is fit here, this is telling me where this is matching up, and it needs to be in the middle of this area here that's flat. So I have to take this down probably 5/8 deeper into the seat here. On any restoration project, there's a mix of art and science. The art here is, you can see there's some funky looking grain, and I don't want that to be at the front, so I want to orient this in a way that the chair is going to look most pleasing as possible from the front. The science part is, I need to line this up and make some critical cuts. So the first part here is, I need to get that hole lined up in the right spot so that I can secure this. That location will then determine how much I take off the back here to get the seat post seated in here properly. And then the last part is, at the top of the chair, I need to cut this flat part here in the right orientation for that back to go on so it can be screwed on properly. And then I need to shape the top at an angle and round it. Each one of these tooling operations, if I mess it up, I could end up having to return another piece on the lathe. I really don't want to do that, so I'm going to take my time, lay it out, and work through it step by step. So I'll bring the back in here so I can look at the whole thing together. And this detail here is where my eye is drawn. I can see that's here on this particular one. So if I rotate it this way, you see here, it almost looks like an eye looking at you. It doesn't look that great. So turn it this way a little bit, and that way the unpleasant part is back here. You're not likely going to see that. So I think that's the best orientation. So if I hold the broken piece up here, you can see this hole is drilled right in the center, and then it's countersunk at the back here. So that's what I need to put in the center right here. I'll mark the center here with tape, and then I'll take this over to the drill press. So now that this orientation is locked in here, I've got a nice tight joint. This is where I need to cut back the slope so I can seat that more, and I can close up this gap once this gets seated in properly. What I'm going to do is put some masking tape here on this part, and then here on this part. And what I'm going to do is line up a line on here, and this will tell me the orientation of this piece. So when I have to take it off and put it back on, I know I need to line up these lines here, and then I don't have to keep reattaching the arm. Now I can estimate here on the tenon, I need to take that back a little bit here, bring it up this way, do the same on the other side, and that should provide support here while being able to fully seat that tenon. It's near the end of my workday, and that's when I find I'm most likely to make mistakes. So I don't want to be working when I don't have a clear mind on this piece, because I don't want to make a mistake. So what I'm going to do is set this aside, and tomorrow morning I'll bring out my benchtop shave horse, and then I can start shaping this and fitting it. I'm also going to get ready for Fixing Furniture Live tonight. We've got a live session where I'm here in my workshop. Participants can ask questions as we go through. And tonight's topic is how to identify wood finishes. If you're interested in participating in something like that, this is part of our Fixing Furniture community. You can go to fixingfurniture.com and I'll leave a link in the video description. If you've never seen one of these before, this is a shave horse. These are typically very large, that you'd have like 6 feet in a bench, but I've created a benchtop shave horse. And what this does is allows you to clamp something down with foot power, which means you've got 2 hands free to work. Now it's really important in this piece because what I need to do is hold this in place, get my lines lined up here, and then use a draw knife. So this is a very sharp tool that allows me to come in here and sweep out that piece that I need, get that angle, and get it shaped exactly how it's going to fit in the chair. It might be a little hard to see, but here's one line, here's another line. I need to create a plane across there and come up here. So what I'm going to do is just start by taking out a little bit. On either side. So rather than try to take out one big chunk, just gently cut out little sections as we go. And then what I can do is I can flatten that out. So we'll test fit this and see how it works. I can already tell I have a fair bit to take off. So that's lined up here. So I'm just starting to take apart that area. So I need to go further up the tenon and then out. So the test fit here, you can see this angle is working out well here. This is getting seated much deeper, but up here we're still not down far enough on the post yet. That handle needs to come up a bit. So a little more shaping left to do. I'll give you a close up here. This is what I've cut out with the draw knife. So I've essentially extended the tenon by cutting this away and forming a longer tenon on it. So it's something you can only do with hand tools. It's not something you can do with a machine. So let's give it another test fit and see what it's like. So you can see it's much better seated down here, and let's take a look at the top. I'll get this arm lined up and set down, and there we go. I'll insert the screw here to lock this in place so I can use it to align the other parts. And yes, I'm using a Robertson screw here. There are screw caps that go on these, so the screw will be concealed. So I'm just using a modern screw. Now, it's a fairly long screw. When you're screwing into end grain of wood, you need much longer thread grip than you do if you're screwing into something cross grain. Yeah, nice tight fit. So I'm going to turn this frontwards now. I'll set the other parts on the front, and we'll see how these are going to line up. So what I'm seeing here is this side has to come down, but the only way it's going to come down is this has to be seated in that groove. And with all the stuff that somebody had put in here, huge chunks of wood, there's just no opportunity for that to sit in. So if I hold this roughly where it needs to be, about there, you can see this tenon sticking out So there's a lot of room here that this needs to get down, seated into the chair. So I've got a lot of cleanup work to do. So here's all the wood that I've taken out of here so far, and we'll take a close-up look. You can see here it's meeting up almost where that original line was, but there's a little bit right here, there's a gap. I think that that is supposed to sit down here, and over here on this side there's also this gap here. So I'm thinking it's got to go down about 1/4 inch really to seat that properly and get that solid. Now I'll show you what I've got going on inside the slot here. There's wood filler down here, there's a piece of wood this way, there's still some additional pieces of wood. It's almost like just someone threw a bunch of scraps in there and threw some glue in and hope for the best. I've never seen so much glue in one place. It's just coming out in chunks. So let's give this another test. And there's a piece of veneer at the front here. I just need to pull up to get the back in. So it's seating well right down here. You can see that it's on that shoulder, but over here it's still sticking up a bit, and this post is sticking up a bit, but it's touching at the back here. So it's time to look at this mortise. I'll turn this around here, and I did notice this earlier. There's a previous repair here. You can see there used to be a split, and it looks like there's a nail hole that's been filled there. I'll turn it around a little bit more, and we'll take a look at the back. There's a continuous piece that runs across this back here, but unfortunately this has been notched out. You can see here on this previous break, someone, in order to fix this, patched on another piece of wood. And in order to get that on, they've notched this apron or the seat rail. So there's been some damage done here. The mortise itself is also in pretty bad shape. I'll take this tenon out and we can take a look at it. There's a lot of glue inside here, and the fit is kind of sloppy, meaning that the tenon is moving around in there. So I'm going to start by cleaning out the glue and see what we've got. I put the tenon back in here and it's touching on the inside here, but you can see there's still a gap here. So I need to trim some of that down to get that in there. I'm not sure why that's not fitting properly. But the other thing I've noticed too is if I move the chair back forward, look at how much slop is in that mortise. There's just really nothing preventing it from moving around. So I think what I'm going to do is work on this area up here. I'll attach this new piece, get that cut in there, and then that'll determine what our angle looks like down here. And I really don't know. I don't like using epoxy, but this might turn into an epoxy pour. So we'll line this up here and mark the bottom of my cut. And then what I need to do is figure out where to draw the line on the top here. Now this is going to be a very difficult cut to make. I don't want to do it with a handsaw because there's too much of a chance there's going to be some variation in that cut. So what I need to do is figure out how I'm going to cut that on a table saw so I can get a perfectly machined line that will line up with this plywood. Jigs are a woodworker's best friend. So you saw me use this earlier. It's for stabilizing a round piece. And I think if I use this here, That's providing a little bit of lift here because it's not perfectly flat. And that will allow me to cut a straight line here. If I add another block here to figure out what direction this needs to be, I can line up that cut with a table saw the way I need. And I should be able to flip this out, put it here, and get my table saw cut. So first thing I need to do is take off the blade guard so I can get through this process while seeing what I'm doing, and the blade guard won't interfere with the work. So there's the idea. I just have to figure out how to secure this so it's not going to rotate or twist on me as I make the cut, so it's safe and accurate. I've attached this block here, and when I line this up on my jig, I end up with an even space all the way along between the piece and the blade. So it tells me it's running parallel, which is exactly what I want. Unfortunately, when I put the new turning on, it's not aligned the same way. So you can see how there's a gap here and it's going to be cutting in here. So I'm going to have to use this jig to tweak this as I go along, make a light cut, test, see how it works, adjust it, and make another light cut. I'll have to progressively do that until I get the cut that I want. Well, here's the moment of truth to see if it all comes together. Let's see how this comes together here. Yep, nice straight line. I do need a little bit of a notch further down here to get that the right height. So the next part is to stain this post, and I've already set the grain on it. That's why I've got black on here. Once I apply the acrylic brown stain, it'll come through and look like this. So I'll just take off my little marker here. I've marked it on the tenon so I know where it goes in. I'm going to set it in place because I want to see the stain going on in relation to these other pieces here. If you're interested in making one of these benchtop shave horses, they're really compact. I've got plans on my website. I'll leave a link in the video description. When matching stain, it can be really tricky because here you can see in the arm, I've got a lighter color. Down here where I need to repair the veneer, there's some reflex here that are lighter and areas that are darker. On the back, it's a little bit different color as well. So the best thing to do is stand it up in place, use the old piece as a guide if you've got one. And that way, when I apply the stain, I can vary the intensity of it as I go through the process. I've now got the base coat applied, so you can see from a color perspective, it's looking pretty good. But there are these dark areas on the turning that I need to darken in here, otherwise this will look too new. So this is where toning comes in. So what I'm doing is using a dark stain, and I'm just going to wipe it off in the brush And then I want to put it in this area here. And then I'm just going to move it around with my finger to sort of get that stain in there. So I'll go across the chair and do this and get it toned in so it's looking much closer to the original. While that stain dries, what I'll do is turn this around and take these parts off and look at how to address this lifting veneer here to get it resecured. I've got an area about this big that needs glue underneath it and clamp down. You can see how this is moving. So what I'm going to do is cut it with a knife along the grain, use some hide glue underneath it and a palette knife to move that around, and I've got some complex clamping on here to make sure I can get an even pressure on that curved surface. So we'll start off by finding a grain line here, and what I'm going to do is open it up so I can access the surface below it. If I stick this knife in, you can see just how far that loose veneer is. So it's a little pocket there. If I go in from this side, let's see. How far is it this way? Yeah, it's pretty far that way too. Okay, time to load up the glue. So I've got a large syringe here. I'm just going to give myself lots of glue to play with. And this isn't toxic glue, but I've got a glove on here because it can get really sticky. Okay, so I can feel that the glue is tacky under there. It's moving around. What I need to do is work it to the extreme edges. Okay, I think we're getting there. Okay, so we're good for one side. Okay, I'm going to come at it from this side now. Step 2 is I want to make sure that that glue is moved around. You can hear the glue moving underneath. Okay, so now what we're going to do, I've got some foam here to help spread out the clamping pressure. I've got some acrylic here that will do the same. It'll help spread that pressure. And then I have blocks of wood here. So I'll clamp on each of these. There's one. So because this is curved, as I add each block here, it will help conform to the shape of the seat. I'm going to let this sit overnight just to give it lots of time to cure. I've got button plugs that I need to stain, and I also have some research I want to do on this patent, so I'll go through that and we'll come back to this in the morning. Now these are our mushroom-shaped button plugs. So button refers to the top, it's got a curve to it. The mushroom refers to it's got a rabbit here. So these are oak, this is what I'm going to be using. Now there are different types of plugs. This one here is a button top as well. You can see it's curved, but it's tapered to go inside a hole. This one here, these are ones I've made. These are just tapered, and they're meant to be cut flush to the surface once they're installed. So a few different types of plugs, but these oak ones, I'll get 4 of them out here, stain them up, and get them ready for the glue up of the chair. After a lot of research, I found the patent for this part. I've got the diagram here, so I'll set it down on the bench and we can take a closer look. So on the diagram, this is the part here that I've taken off the chair, and these are some different views of that part. So this is a patent to hold on these springs. So the base is a fixed base, so this is called a platform rocker or a platform spring rocker. You can see here it's got 2 stretchers here like I had previously glued. The front is a little bit different here. The top is obviously different. But the idea here is that this chair is rocking back and forth. So if we look at some of the details here, we can see who the inventors are. So we can see here the inventors were Arthur White and Adolph W. Schram. So I've done further research on these 2 gentlemen, and I did find that Adolph William Schram was credited as the originator of the convolute spring for the rocking chairs. In the obituary for A.W. Schram, it does outline here that he was the first manufacturer of platform rockers in the Midwest US. That was around 1888. It does go on to talk about developing the idea of the convolute spring rocker, and he continued to manufacture rocking chairs up until 1913 under the company name A.W. Schram and Sons Company. Now I have looked online and I found a few more of these rockers, but there aren't that many that seem to exist out there. The ones that are the highest priced are between $300 and $400. This one, in the condition that it's in, probably is not worth much at all because of the damage that was done on previous repair work. So that's unfortunate. But this has some special meaning for the owners, so I'm restoring it here so that they can make much more use of it. It's always interesting when I find a piece of history like this because we can date back the piece. It's probably early 1900s this was produced. Oftentimes I've got furniture that has no identification in it, and really it's just guesswork. So what I'll do now is unclamp this piece and we'll take a look. If you are looking at setting up your shop, what I'd recommend is putting a clamp rack right beside your working area. So you can see how easy this is for me to unclamp this and get the clamps stored away just up here on the rack. So I'm hoping that this is going to turn out as smoothly as I hope, given the convex shape. Let's take a look. Yeah, that's pretty good. So just clean this off with clean water. Get any of that glue out that came out between the pores. Let's see. Yeah, it's good and solid there. Oh, there's a loose bit right here. I can see that moving. And what else? Oh, out here on the perimeter, there's a piece here. So what I'll have to do is go through the same process here and here, get those tightened down, get them clamped up, and we'll be good to go. I've got that glued up, so while I let that sit, what I'm going to do is put the first coat of shellac on this post. Now, I'm using garnet shellac on here because I've got a dark wood. I prefer to use garnet shellac, and you can see just how dark that liquid is. So I've got it on a bristle brush here, and all I do is brush it on. You don't want to overbrush this. You basically want to apply it and let it sit. It dries very quickly, so you can see the coat I put on up above here is dry already, just between moving the camera and putting it on. So that's bringing out the richness and the color in that piece. I'll give you a close up here. You can see just how rich that color is once the garnet shellac goes on. Again, there's no shellac and there's shellac. So it's fun to go through and transform a piece like this. So I'll put the old piece next to this, and the dark tones are looking good. The light tones are a little bit too dark here. So I'm just going to take some 4/0 steel wool, rub that down a little bit, take a little bit of the stain off, and that should give me these light tones that I need. So you can see now I've rubbed it down so it's much lighter than it was before. So as I put this on, I've now got a match on the finish. I have a few more coats of shellac to put on that post, but I'll do that once the chair is assembled. The last thing I need to do before assembly is clean up the joinery. You can see here someone's patched on a piece of wood and there's gobs of glue everywhere, so that needs to come off. But once that's together, I can get the chair assembled. I am concerned about the back post here. It was a little bit loose before I trimmed it and got it further into the mortise, so I need to make sure that that's solid so I know what adhesive I'm using. If you'd like to support our Fixing Furniture YouTube channel, you can go to fixingfurniture.com and join our Fixing Furniture community. There you've got access to have conversations with others about repairing furniture, as well as participate in Fixing Furniture Live, where I'm live here in the workshop and we can have a conversation. There are also a number of downloadable resource sheets, including how to mix your own shellac. Okay, all the joinery is cleaned up now. So what I want to do is test the fit of this back. I know I've got a strong support from this post, so I'm just going to take that out of the way. And that'll allow me to judge how strong this connection is here. So get it fully seated, and yeah, it's not that great. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, because of this movement here, this is just way too much movement to make something secure, is I'm going to use epoxy in here. Just to show you from the side here, this is how much movement is in that joint. Normally I would never put epoxy in an antique chair, but let me show you why I'm going to do that. There's a huge void in here, and in order to patch that void, I'd have to take out a section of wood here and repair that mortise. That mortise goes way down here. In order to repair that, it's going to take a fair bit of wood out of here. I'm also dealing with a laminated plywood seat. You can see here, it's previously been broken. And you can see here it wasn't aligned properly. And when this was repaired, someone decided to put on a mending plate of wood. And in doing so, they cut the apron of the seat rail here. So there's already been a lot of damage done to this chair. So I think given the low value of this chair, and really wanting to make sure this is a repair that's going to last as long as possible, filling that void with epoxy will make this rock solid and give it the best chance for survival going forward. I'm all ready for the glue up, and I got the screws that I was looking for from Kennedy Hardware, and I ordered this as well. This is something that's pretty unique. Kennedy Hardware has a bunch of skeleton keys that you can order, a whole set. So have you ever tried to open a lock that you couldn't get into? Well, here are some skeleton keys that will help you get into the locks. It's really hard to find keys for old locks, but with a set of skeleton keys now, I've got a whole bunch of options to be able to open the next lock I encounter. I'll leave a link to these and the screws in the video description. Now, I need to let this dry a little bit longer, so I'm going to set this aside. When I come back, it's time for the glue up. I haven't glued anything together yet. I'm doing what's called a dry fit. I put the screws in the back here, and what I'm doing is just making sure all these parts fit properly. When I used to design and build furniture, dry fitting is a critical part of the final construction process to make sure everything fits together well. And it's a good thing I've done this, because on this part of the connection here, there were glue blocks, and that's because there was a gap. So I've trimmed these parts to fit properly, but I've also realized there's a problem down on the sides. The arm post here is attached with a screw, but on here, someone has refinished this whole surface, and it's got a finish. So if I put glue on here, it's not going to stick to that finish. So what I need to do is position it in the right spot, mark it out with tape, and then take that finish off. If I don't glue this properly, what happens is this is just going to want to rotate on that screw. This is a critical part of the structure that helps support the back. So I'll screw this in place with my brand new screw, and then take masking tape and mark it at the area so I know where to take the finish off. So I just do this to roughly mark out the area, and then what I can do is take smaller pieces of tape, mark the inner areas. So that's now down to bare wood, and that is what glue needs to stick to. You can see a little bit of the finish here. I just left a bit of a margin. I might need to touch up the odd spot, but I think I'll be okay. I'm finally ready for the glue up. So I'm using high glue for all the joints except for this back post here, and that will be put in with epoxy. So because I'm using epoxy, I have to be wearing an organic cartridge respirator. And what that does is protects my lungs from the chemicals that are used in epoxy adhesives. So I'll be strapping this on and getting to work. The glue is now cured. It takes 24 hours for this epoxy to come to full strength. So it's now rock hard, and it's time for me to test it out. While the glue was curing, I went through and I put another coat of garnet shellac on the post, and you can see here, it really does now blend in. It's got the right color and right sheen to match perfectly with this chair. You'd never know this was a new addition to the chair. I've also added on the screw caps, so they're all set to go. There is a bit of a void on the right post here where I used epoxy, so I'll fill that with epoxy putty and stain that to match, but I'll do that off camera. If you're interested in learning about epoxy putty, it's wonderful stuff, and learning how to shape it, I'll leave a link at the end of the video to a video that shows everything about epoxy putty. So I'm going to put this together, we'll get it inside, and I can test it out. Let's give it a try. Oh, it's a very smooth rock. So this rocking chair is now ready to go back to the customer. This antique will last for years to come now. And my next project is to work on these two stools that came out of a bank. They have sentimental value for the customer. They'd like them set to the same height, There's some repairs to do on them and some finish to touch up as well. I've got some distressing to do to disguise all the repairs. So you'll see that in a video coming up. Here's the video here on how to use epoxy putty and how to shape it. And thank you for watching Fixing Furniture.